right, good morning, one and all. Today I will be presenting from my home office on sociology and music education. I hope that you enjoy this from Course Spaces and that you're all doing okay during this scary and stressful time. All right, before I begin, does anyone know what sociology is or what it entails? Yes?
I think that it is the interactions between humans.
Basically, yeah, so it's the study of human behaviors in social groups. So, we can go to the next slide. Today I will be talking about sociology and exceptional learners. Has anyone heard of exceptional learners before? No? So, exceptional learners encompasses a wide variety. So it can be individuals who exhibit aptitudes and characteristics that differ from typical development. So that could include physical impairments, learning disabilities, and it can also include those who are highly gifted, so like child prodigies as well. So it's basically anyone who differs from what is considered the normal developing range. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So an example of that would be autism spectrum disorder, which I will be focusing on today. You might be wondering, how did I come to pick that specific one out of all the different exceptional learners that there are? It's mostly because I've been working with kids for a while, like through swim teaching and after school care and summer camps. So I've met a lot of kids with different abilities, and I was working one-on-one with a boy who was on the spectrum, more heavily on the spectrum. And we had a pretty good relationship, but it would be really sad some days seeing him just crumple to the floor, saying it felt like his brain was going to explode because it would just be a sensory overload for him. And the more I worked with him, the more I was interested in just researching ways that I can help certain individuals with their daily life on the spectrum. All right, we can move on. So before I dive in, we should come to understand what is autism spectrum disorder, also known as ASD. So if you see ASD there, that is the shorter term for it. And like, what does it entail? So according to the American Psychiatric Association, autism is a developmental disorder characterized by differences in areas of communication, socialization, and repetitive behaviors. So a main characteristic is that a lot of individuals on the spectrum experience difficulties in social skills. So that can include difficulties with verbal communication, difficulties recognizing different social interactions, difficulties communicating ideas and feelings, difficulties developing and maintaining relationships, and a lack of social and emotional reciprocity. But before I go on, I just want to make it clear that throughout my presentation, it's really important to remember that autism is a spectrum. So there are a lot of different variations within which it can manifest itself in individuals. So when I'm talking through my presentation about different studies or different core characteristics, that doesn't mean that all of the characteristics throughout all individuals on the spectrum present themselves in the same way. So that's just something to remember. It's just from my research that I found. There are actually certain characteristics for certain individuals that are very prominent. Say, for those who are on the lower functioning end of the spectrum, they may be nonverbal, but then those who are higher functioning may be completely verbal and have great communication skills. So just something to keep in mind as I go on. Okay, so how does autism spectrum disorder relate to music? Well, first we are going to talk about savants. Has anyone heard of that term before?
Yes.
Yeah, do you know what it is, or could you define it?
Yes, someone that has an extreme ability, almost like in a genius level.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And do you know if it's genius for all things, or is it usually towards one specific
Towards
element?
one specific thing.
Yeah, exactly. So it's the definition would be someone with cognitive impairments that has certain abilities that are far in excess of the average, basically. So I want to show you a video actually of a savant. I saw this a couple years ago, and I just thought it was extraordinary. So you get to see for yourself.
The first time I saw the Empire State Building, I was about 12 years old. I love the Empire State Building very much because of the very detailed and nice, beautiful structures and windows.
Wilshire was diagnosed with autism at the age of 3, and he was mute until the age of 5. He went to a special school called Queensland School in Fulham, London, and there they discovered that Stephen had this unique ability of reproducing cities and buses and cars, very lifelike to what we see today. I have no idea how he's able to do this, but he enjoys doing it. It's helped to form a relationship that he has between pen and paper, and also an understanding of the cities that we live in. One of his mottos is that, do the best you can and never stop, regardless. So I think it's a great lesson for us all.
So, what did you think of the video?
Amazing.
It's extraordinary, right? So, this can also be related to music because a lot of individuals on the spectrum, in fact, most of them have an enhanced ability to isolate tones and perceive pitch and just respond to music. So, the musical stimuli, they're able to better process it than other stimuli, for example. So why could that be important if they're more inclined to be musical? How could we use that in an educational setting?
In terms of focus, maybe within a classroom setting?
Exactly. So if a lot of individuals who are on the spectrum are already show innate ability for music and are more interested in it, then we can use that as a lens to engage them in other activities, such as social activities, which I'll be talking about. You may be wondering how this is possible. I thought it would be interesting to show the connection between the brains. So for those on the spectrum, there have been a lot of scans for the brain that show that they have an excess of short-range brain connections, so shorter neuron pathways. But this would be an individual on the spectrum, and this would be a typically developing individual with more longer developing brain connections. So this would mean, does anyone know what that would mean if there are shorter brain connections?
Not
if there
really.
Are more?
Shorter, less ability to concentrate and.
Yeah, so it could mean like it's harder to focus on tasks that encompass more, but the more shorter range brain connections you have, the easier it is to narrow in on one very, very specific aspect. So I thought this was just very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So that is why a lot of them are musical savants or have, photographic memory or insane mathematical abilities. Those are some of the examples. So, as Lagas stated, appropriate social interactions may be some of the most difficult and important lessons a child with ASD will learn. Well, as music educators, we have the amazing opportunity to help them learn social skills through the use of music, which brings me to my research question. How does music play a role in improving social skills of individuals with autism spectrum disorder? So one of them is emotional responsiveness. So based on the proposal that music's main purpose was to promote social bonding, there's been a common misconception for many years, and probably still even today, that individuals with autism are emotionally unresponsive to music since they already experience social deficits. However, there have been multiple studies that have proven this to be false, and that they are able to respond emotionally to music in fact, remarkably the same manner as typically developing individuals. So there was a study done by Heaton, Hermeling, and Pring where they asked children who are on the spectrum to pair happy and sad faces with excerpts of music in major and minor keys. And those individuals were able to pair the happy faces with major keys, which, just a little bit of background for you both, the major keys usually sound more uplifting, and then minor keys kind of sound a little bit darker. And so they paired the sad faces with minor keys. But we do want to be we want to be careful for that study because you don't want to be telling the children how they should feel. So that study could have some flaws in that you're telling them if it's a major key, you should feel happy, and if it's a minor key, you should feel sad. We need to give individuals the opportunity to explore their feelings, not tell them how music should make them feel. And in another study by Allen and Hill, a semi-structured questionnaire pertaining to the use of music and how individuals on the spectrum use music in their everyday lives was given out.